Before I was arrested, I went around the country campaigning for our party, and I came into contact with ordinary people all over the place. And I knew that in any country, if the majority are determined to follow a certain path, they will be able to do it sooner or later. Of course, there was a lot of fear. If you've lived under dictatorship for many decades, then you get used to a state of fear. And getting over fear is not easy. But once they manage that first step, then I think they can go on.
This is what we actually wanted to ask you about, is the nature of dictatorship or the nature of oppression. That, in your opinion, like how does it work that a whole nation becomes submissive to a dictator or to an oppressive regime, and they just live with it? They don't fight it for a long time. How is this national psyche working, in your opinion?
I've always found it very strange, because my nature is such that I always question everything. And I think basically one of the great problems in my country was that people stopped asking questions. When they were told to do something by somebody who seemed to be an authority, they would do it without asking why. Whereas I always wanted to know the question why. Why should I do it? For what purpose? And what right had they to ask me to do it? And these were the questions that I would ask almost naturally and automatically. After we founded the National League for Democracy, this was one of the things we had to try to teach the members of our party, that they must ask questions. They must not take everything for granted, and they must not obey somebody who is in authority simply because he or she is an authority. Does he or she have the right to give these orders? That is the first thing. And then, are these orders correct? Are they justified? And so on and so on.
And the lack of these questions, is it because of fear? What is the role of fear in keeping in place a dictatorship?
It's partly culture and it's partly fear, because I think it is part of Burmese culture not to question your elders, those who are in authority. I think this is what our children are taught from a young age. On one hand, I like politeness. I like the fact that younger people are polite to older people, because as people get older, they grow weaker. And as younger people grow older, they grow stronger. And I always think that there is something particularly beautiful about the strong being tender with the weak and not taking advantage of the position. So it should work the other way around as well. But I'm afraid this goes on still quite a lot, not just in Burma, but I think in many other societies as well, that the strong, whether strong in years, or physically stronger, financially stronger, politically stronger, socially stronger, they do tend to want to dominate those who are weak.
And what makes a nation accept that, other than culture?
Fear, of course, is fundamental to many things that go wrong in our world. I've said very often that fear is the foundation of hatred. When people say they hate somebody, basically they fear that person. There is no need for you to hate somebody that you don't fear. You may dislike him or her. Oh, that's perfectly all right. For example, we may dislike sour fruits, but you won't say, people don't say, I'm frightened of oranges. You know, you may just say, I don't like oranges. But people would say things like, I'm frightened, I hate snakes, which usually means they're frightened of snakes. Or I hate insects, which usually means they're frightened of insects. So I think hatred and fear are very, very closely linked. And if we want to eliminate fear, we have to try to get at the roots of hatred.
You mentioned that actually we can learn from our fears, but only if we face them. So every fear has to teach something to us. And when did you learn this in your life?
Well, very early on.
This is the way.
Because I used to be afraid of the dark. When I was a child, I was terribly frightened of the dark. I thought there were ghosts lurking in the dark. And whenever I went into a room where there were no lights on, I would insist that somebody should go in front of me and put the lights on, because I found it very frightening going into a dark place. Then I suppose when I was about 11, I decided that this was getting ridiculous. And to be frightened is a big burden. So I thought, well, I've got to face it. And it was, once you decide to face it, you get over it very quickly. It only took me about 2 weeks. Every night I would go downstairs when the house was completely dark and walk around in the rooms. Well, the first few days were terrible. I was terrified. But after a week or so, that was it. And I was never frightened of the dark again.
What was your fear or your biggest fear during your house arrest that you had to face in order to get rid of it?
Well, I can't think of any big fear I had then. I was very much able to live on my own. I found that out very quickly, just within a matter of days, because it kept me totally alone. And after a week or so, I knew that living alone was not going to be a problem for me. Besides, of course, I did have books. I was able to listen to the radio. So it was not as though I were totally on my own with nothing except my inner resources. I did learn later that many people are unable to live on their own. I don't know whether this is something temperamental or this is something to do with the way in which you are brought up. I was not really brought up alone. I was brought up in a very Burmese way, which means that always lots of people around.
You said that it was never a question for me to leave and abandon my friends and my people. And we were wondering that you could actually say the same regarding your own family.
Yes, because my family were much better off than my people. In the end, you choose the weaker ones, and you choose the ones with whom you have suffered together. My family are fortunate, they're well off, they are materially well off, they live in a safe country where their rights were fully protected by the law. So in a sense, they were not the weaker of those with whom I was associated. I think in the end, you choose the ones who are weak and alone because you feel that they need you more.
Even if they're your children. And the children are weak usually, right?
My children were far better off than the children of my colleagues in Burma, because although I was under detention, my children were free and nobody was going to threaten their freedom in any way. In fact, they received a lot of compassion and sympathy, and they were surrounded by caring friends and relatives. But the families of my colleagues who were imprisoned, now they had real problems to face, especially if the imprisoned parent happened to be the breadwinner. So suddenly they were left without an income. Their financial security was taken away from them. Their emotional security was taken away from them, and they were perpetually under threat. They never knew when the authorities would start persecuting them, not just the parent that they had been arrested.
Were your sons able to forgive this situation? Or did you ever ask for forgiveness because you were not there, because you were not there?
No, I've never asked them for forgiveness, and I don't think it's for us to forgive one another. I think it's for us to try to make the best of our relationship as it is. Well, we say in Buddhism that it's unwholesome to indulge in remorse. Throughout your life, you have to make decisions, you have to make choices, and once you've made them, you live with them and make the best of them. And indulging in remorse doesn't get you anywhere. I don't really see the point of what-ifs. I always think of the present and the future. And the past is for you to take lessons from, to draw lessons from. I don't think you should forget the past, because that means that in a way you are abandoning the experiences that should help you to face the future in a better way. But I think the past is the past. You know how the Greeks used to say that even the gods can't change the past. And we say a similar thing in Burmese Buddhism as well, that the Lord Buddha himself cannot undo what has already been done. So what has happened has already happened. You can't wish that it had not happened. But you can have a lot of influence on how the results of whatever was done in the past should be shaped to make a better future.